Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to take you inside one of the most secretive and haunting corners of the American criminal justice system. Red Onion State Prison, a Supermax facility built not just to incarcerate, but to isolate. This isn't just a prison. It's a world of silence where human beings spend 23 hours a day locked in 8 by 10-foot cells, often for years or decades on end. Red Onion State Prison, located in the remote hills of Virginia, is one of the most notorious Supermax facilities in the United States. Built in the late 1990s, it was designed to house inmates deemed the most dangerous or disruptive, those who, in the eyes of the criminal justice system, could not safely coexist with the general prison population. Unlike standard prisons, Red Onion's architecture and operations are entirely oriented around control, containment, and extreme isolation. Each cell is a small, concrete box, measuring roughly 8 feet by 10 feet, equipped with a toilet, a small sink, a bed, and nothing more. Inmates are confined to these cells for the overwhelming majority of the day, typically 23 hours or more, with minimal human contact. The term Supermax itself refers to a type of prison designed to maximize security and minimize the potential for violence. At Red Onion, every aspect of daily life is regulated and monitored. Movement is restricted to carefully scheduled, short periods, usually a half hour of solitary exercise in a small outdoor pen or an indoor recreation area. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door, eliminating face-to-face interaction with staff whenever possible. Guards communicate with inmates largely through intercoms or small openings in the cell doors, emphasizing distance and minimizing risk, but also contributing to a profound sense of isolation. What makes Red Onion particularly unique is the combination of high-tech security and psychological containment. Surveillance cameras line every corridor and common area, and the facility's layout is designed so that inmates rarely, if ever, come into contact with one another. The Supermax model assumes that certain individuals are so dangerous or so likely to incite violence that the only way to maintain order is to limit their ability to interact. This has resulted in a system that is highly efficient at controlling physical behavior, but deeply consequential for the mental and emotional well-being of those confined. Over the years, Red Onion has become a symbol in a national conversation about solitary confinement and prison reform. Advocates point to it as an extreme example of how incarceration in the United States can prioritize security over rehabilitation, often placing human beings in conditions that may exacerbate mental illness or create new psychological trauma. Despite these concerns, the facility continues to operate under the same principles, reflecting a broader trend in the U.S. toward highly controlled environments for high-risk inmates, and highlighting the tension between public safety, punishment, and human rights. At Red Onion State Prison, the hallmark of daily life is extreme isolation, often referred to as solitary confinement. Inmates typically spend 23 hours a day locked inside small, windowless cells, leaving only a single hour for any form of movement outside the cell, usually in a tiny outdoor enclosure or a controlled indoor area. This extreme limitation on physical freedom is designed to prevent violence, maintain security, and separate those deemed dangerous or disruptive from the general population. However, the consequences of such confinement reach far beyond physical restriction, deeply affecting mental, emotional, and even social functioning. Each cell is meticulously designed for containment. An 8 by 10-foot space with a concrete bed, a toilet, a sink, and a small observation window in the door. Walls are bare, lighting is artificial, and the environment is largely silent, aside from the occasional sounds of distant machinery or other isolated inmates. Daily routines are regimented and repetitive. Meals are slid through a small slot in the door, guards pass by at set times, and any movement outside the cell is tightly scheduled. Inmates rarely, if ever, interact directly with staff or fellow prisoners, and even when they do, the interactions are brief and heavily monitored. The monotony of this environment is psychologically taxing. Time becomes difficult to measure, as days and nights blur together under constant artificial lighting. In the absence of meaningful social interaction or stimulation, Inmates often experience heightened stress, anxiety, and depression. Even routine activities like reading, writing, or listening to music are limited by strict regulations and scarce resources. This extreme lack of stimulation, combined with prolonged confinement, can lead to symptoms that include hallucinations, paranoia, and difficulty thinking clearly, a phenomenon well documented by psychologists studying solitary confinement. Furthermore, the conditions at Red Onion are not uniform for all inmates. Those who are deemed higher risk may be subjected to even stricter limitations: more time confined to their cells, fewer privileges, and more constant surveillance. Every aspect of life is under scrutiny, from how an inmate responds to a guard's instructions to how they manage their own behavior in the absence of social contact. In this way, the prison system enforces a dual form of control: physical containment through the cell walls, and psychological containment through isolation and monotony. Inmates have described the isolation as a constant pressure on the mind, where even small deviations in thought or behavior can feel magnified. The absence of conversation, eye contact, or shared experiences makes it difficult to maintain a sense of identity and connection to the outside world. For many, the walls of the cell feel not just physical but symbolic, representing a separation not only from society but from their own sense of self, as the human need for interaction and connection is systematically denied. One of the most profound and devastating aspects of life at Red Onion State Prison is the psychological toll of prolonged solitary confinement. Spending up to 23 hours a day in an enclosed, barren cell is not just a matter of physical restriction. It has deep and often lasting impacts on mental health. Inmates in Red Onion report a wide range of psychological effects, from chronic anxiety and depression to intense feelings of anger, frustration, and hopelessness. The human mind is wired for social interaction, stimulation, and engagement, and when these basic needs are systematically denied, the consequences can be severe. Isolation in the Supermax environment strips inmates of almost all sensory and social input. They have little to no contact with other people, minimal access to natural light or outdoor space, and monotonous daily routines that offer few opportunities for meaningful activity. This lack of stimulation can lead to cognitive distortions. Time can feel distorted, thoughts can become obsessive, and reality may begin to blur. Many inmates report experiencing hallucinations, memory lapses, and difficulty concentrating, all symptoms associated with extreme social deprivation. For some, even brief interactions with staff or other inmates can become overwhelming, triggering emotional outbursts or withdrawal. The effects of solitary confinement are cumulative. Short-term isolation can be distressing, but long-term exposure, often stretching over years or even decades at Red Onion, can fundamentally alter a person's sense of self. Inmates describe losing touch with their identity, feeling as though they have become a mere observer of their own life rather than an active participant. Emotional regulation becomes difficult, leading to irritability, heightened aggression, and even self-harm. Many report a sense of being trapped, not just physically, but mentally, an inescapable environment that erodes hope and fosters despair. Research on solitary confinement supports these observations. Psychologists have found that extended periods of isolation can exacerbate pre-existing mental health conditions, including depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, and can even induce new conditions in previously healthy individuals. Sleep disturbances are common, fueled by the monotony, stress, and sometimes artificial lighting of the cell. Over time, inmates may develop hypervigilance, paranoia, or extreme sensitivity to minor stimuli, all adaptive responses to a highly controlled, unpredictable environment that, ironically, become maladaptive outside the cell. Inmates at Red Onion describe the struggle to maintain their humanity and sanity in this context. They develop coping mechanisms, such as mental exercises, reading, or repetitive routines, in an effort to structure their days and retain a sense of control. Yet, the psychological toll is undeniable. Isolation is not a neutral state, but a form of stress that attacks the mind relentlessly. Every day in solitary feels like a test of endurance, patience, and identity, a pressure that, for some, becomes unbearable. One of the most remarkable aspects of the documentary Inside Red Onion State Prison is the unprecedented access it provides to a facility normally shrouded in secrecy. Red Onion is not just a high-security prison. It is a Supermax institution specifically designed to limit visibility and interaction, both for the inmates and for the outside world. For decades, journalists, filmmakers, and even researchers have been largely denied entry, making Red Onion a symbol of the hidden realities of America's most extreme incarceration practices. This documentary breaks through that barrier, allowing viewers a rare glimpse into daily life inside the Supermax and giving voice to a system usually experienced only by those within its walls. The access granted by the filmmakers is remarkable not only for its rarity, but also for its depth. Cameras move through the corridors, capture the sterile, echoing cells, and follow the regimented routines of both inmates and staff. Viewers witness the meticulous attention to security, the mechanical efficiency of prison life, and the extraordinary measures taken to maintain control. Beyond the physical environment, the documentary also includes direct interviews with inmates and correctional officers, an opportunity almost unheard of in facilities like Red Onion. Through these interviews, the film humanizes a population that is often reduced to statistics, revealing the individual stories, fears, and struggles of those living under extreme isolation. The significance of this access lies in its ability to illuminate what is normally invisible. Supermax prisons are deliberately designed to be opaque to the public, and their inner workings often remain a mystery even to policymakers and advocates. By providing visual and narrative insight, the documentary allows the audience to understand how daily life is structured around security, compliance, and control, while also showing the human consequences of these policies. The footage captures the silence of the cells, the rhythm of the guards' patrols, the brief, highly controlled movements of inmates, and the stark architecture that reinforces isolation. Each visual detail conveys both the meticulous planning behind the facility and the emotional weight carried by those confined within it. Moreover, this rare access challenges viewers' assumptions about incarceration. Seeing the environment firsthand, the oppressive smallness of the cells, the monotony of the routines, and the pervasive sense of surveillance, makes the effects of solitary confinement tangible in a way that written reports or secondhand accounts cannot. It forces the audience to confront the reality that these are living, breathing human beings enduring a highly controlled, often psychologically punishing environment. The film's ability to show, rather than merely tell, transforms abstract debates about prison policy into a visceral understanding of life inside Red Onion, bridging the gap between public perception and lived experience. Through this unprecedented access, the documentary accomplishes more than documentation. It opens a window into a world designed to be invisible, revealing the tension between security, control, and humanity, and compelling viewers to reflect on the costs of extreme incarceration. While Red Onion State Prison is often described in terms of cells, security measures, and isolation protocols, the documentary brings forward the personal stories of the inmates, offering a perspective that is usually invisible to the public. Each inmate is more than a number or a label. They're individuals with complex histories, experiences, and emotions. Through interviews and candid observations, the film highlights the daily struggles, coping mechanisms, and reflections of those living in extreme isolation, showing the profound human impact of the Supermax system. Many inmates recount turbulent or traumatic childhoods, violent pasts, or moments that shaped the path that ultimately led them to Red Onion. These stories are not presented to justify criminal behavior, but to humanize the individuals behind the prison walls. By hearing about their experiences, the violence, neglect, or systemic failures that mark their early lives, viewers gain insight into the broader social and personal factors that contribute to incarceration. The film demonstrates that behind each cell door is a life story, a history that is rarely acknowledged in discussions about crime and punishment. Life inside the Supermax imposes extreme psychological and emotional challenges. Inmates describe the crushing monotony of daily routines, the weight of silence, and the sense of time stretching endlessly. Each day in solitary becomes a battle to maintain a sense of identity and purpose. Some inmates develop intricate mental exercises or strict routines to preserve a sense of control, while others rely on reading, writing, or small creative endeavors to anchor themselves in the passage of time. These coping strategies, though essential, underscore the severe deprivation imposed by the environment. Every small action becomes a lifeline against despair. The film also captures moments of vulnerability and resilience. Inmates speak openly about their fears, frustrations, and moments of self-doubt, revealing a raw honesty that is rarely seen in public discourse. At the same time, many show remarkable adaptability, finding ways to endure and retain their humanity despite extreme constraints. These stories highlight both the resilience of the human spirit and the heavy toll that prolonged isolation takes on the mind and body. In some cases, the narratives include reflections on regret, attempts at self-rehabilitation, and hopes for a life beyond the prison walls, offering a poignant reminder of the ongoing struggle for redemption and meaning. Through these personal accounts, the documentary moves beyond statistics and policies to emphasize the human cost of solitary confinement. It challenges viewers to consider not just the institutional design of Supermax prisons, but the real, lived experiences of those inside them. Each story underscores the tension between punishment and humanity, illustrating that even in extreme isolation, inmates retain a complex inner life filled with memory, emotion, and consciousness. The inmates' voices, rare and powerful, serve as the heart of the documentary, offering insight into both the fragility and resilience of individuals enduring some of the harshest conditions in the American penal system. While the focus of Red Onion State Prison often falls on the inmates enduring extreme isolation, the documentary also gives significant attention to the correctional officers and staff who work in this intense environment. Their stories reveal that the psychological and emotional toll of the Supermax extends beyond the inmates. The people responsible for maintaining order and security are themselves deeply affected by the conditions and culture of the prison. Working in a facility designed for maximum control requires constant vigilance, adherence to strict procedures, and the ability to manage high-stakes situations where a single misstep can have serious consequences. Over time, these pressures can accumulate, shaping not only their professional lives, but also their personal well-being. Officers describe a unique and often paradoxical form of stress. On the one hand, they must enforce discipline and maintain a rigid structure that ensures the safety of both inmates and staff. On the other hand, they're acutely aware of the psychological suffering imposed by prolonged solitary confinement. This creates an internal tension. They're trained to perform a role that necessitates strict adherence to rules and authority, yet they witness firsthand the emotional and mental deterioration of the people they oversee. Many officers acknowledge feeling conflicted, frustrated, or emotionally drained as they navigate this dual responsibility. The physical environment of the Supermax adds another layer of strain. Officers spend long hours patrolling narrow corridors, monitoring inmates through security cameras, and conducting repetitive tasks designed to enforce control and minimize risk. The monotony of the routines, coupled with the constant awareness of potential danger, contributes to heightened stress, fatigue, and hypervigilance. Just as isolation can warp an inmate's sense of time and reality, the repetitive, intense environment can affect the mental and emotional state of the staff, creating a workplace that is as psychologically demanding as it is physically controlled. Moreover, the documentary highlights the human moments within this high-pressure environment. Some officers develop empathy for the inmates, recognizing the extreme conditions under which they live while still performing their duties with professionalism and authority. Others grapple with guilt, anger, or frustration, reflecting on the broader societal and institutional systems that place both staff and inmates in these circumstances. The film shows that working in a supermax is not just a job. It is a constant negotiation between authority, personal conscience, and the reality of human suffering, requiring resilience, mental discipline, and often a careful emotional detachment. Through these staff perspectives, the documentary provides a more complete picture of life inside Red Onion, revealing that the cost of extreme incarceration is not borne solely by the inmates. The officers' experiences underscore that the prison system exerts a profound influence on everyone within its walls, shaping behavior, emotion, and identity in ways that are rarely acknowledged. Their stories challenge viewers to consider the broader implications of a system designed around control and isolation, raising questions about the sustainability, morality, and human consequences of such institutions. Red Onion State Prison, as a supermax facility, raises profound and urgent questions about human rights, ethics, and the limits of punishment in the modern American criminal justice system. Solitary confinement, the central practice at Red Onion, is one of the most extreme forms of incarceration, isolating individuals for up to 23 hours a day, often for months or even years at a time. While the facility was built with safety and security in mind, the psychological and emotional consequences of prolonged isolation have led experts, advocates, and international organizations to question whether such practices cross the line from lawful punishment into cruel and unusual treatment. The United Nations has repeatedly criticized long-term solitary confinement, defining it as a form of torture or inhumane treatment when imposed for more than 15 days. Red Onion's practices far exceed this guideline in many cases, as inmates may spend years confined in near total isolation, with minimal sensory or social stimulation. This raises ethical concerns about the balance between public safety and the fundamental rights of incarcerated individuals. The question becomes, can a society that prides itself on human dignity and justice justify a system that systematically deprives people of meaningful contact, autonomy, and mental stimulation? The documentary highlights the human dimension of these questions. Inmates recount the psychological damage, despair, and sense of dehumanization caused by their confinement, while human rights advocates argue that such conditions undermine the very purpose of justice. Solitary confinement may control behavior within the prison, but it often exacerbates mental illness, fosters resentment, and makes rehabilitation exceedingly difficult. This tension between punishment and humane treatment lies at the heart of the human rights debate surrounding supermax prisons. Red Onion also forces viewers to confront the legal and moral ambiguity of solitary confinement. While courts have historically allowed extreme isolation under the guise of security, mounting evidence of its harmful effects challenges the assumption that it is an acceptable or effective form of punishment. Legal challenges, advocacy campaigns, and academic research increasingly frame prolonged isolation as a violation of basic human rights, emphasizing that security and safety do not justify indefinite psychological harm. The debate raises essential questions about the responsibilities of the state to ensure humane treatment even for those who have committed serious crimes. Furthermore, these human rights concerns extend beyond individual well-being to societal implications. By institutionalizing extreme isolation, the system normalizes conditions that erode empathy and compassion, creating a penal culture in which dehumanization becomes routine. Officers and administrators operate within a framework that prioritizes control over care, while society at large often remains unaware of the human cost. The documentary underscores the ethical dilemma. How can a democratic society uphold the principles of justice and human dignity while operating facilities that, in practice, may inflict profound psychological suffering? Through this lens, Red Onion becomes not just a prison, but a case study in the moral complexities of incarceration. It challenges viewers to consider the boundaries of lawful punishment. Amid the stark realities of life inside Red Onion State Prison, The documentary also sheds light on ongoing reform efforts aimed at reducing the harms associated with prolonged solitary confinement. While the facility was built to isolate the most dangerous inmates, growing awareness of the psychological, emotional, and social consequences of extended isolation has prompted both internal and external calls for change. These reforms reflect a broader shift in the criminal justice conversation, balancing concerns about safety and security with the need to uphold human dignity and support rehabilitation. Some reform initiatives focus on reducing the length of time inmates spend in isolation. Recognizing that years of solitary can have devastating and sometimes irreversible effects on mental health, prison administrators have explored programs that allow inmates to gradually reintegrate into less restrictive environments. These programs may include increased access to educational resources, vocational training, and structured group activities, providing inmates with a sense of purpose and connection that is otherwise absent in the Supermax environment. Such measures aim not only to improve mental well-being, but also to reduce violent behavior by encouraging social engagement under controlled circumstances. Other reforms emphasize mental health support and monitoring. Psychologists and counselors are increasingly involved in assessing the mental health of inmates in solitary, identifying those at risk of severe psychological distress, and providing therapeutic interventions. The goal is to prevent the long-term consequences of isolation, including depression, anxiety, self-harm, and psychosis. In some cases, staff receive specialized training to recognize signs of psychological deterioration and respond appropriately, highlighting an effort to integrate humane care within a system originally designed for maximum control. Additionally, advocacy groups and policymakers have pushed for system-wide policy changes aimed at limiting the use of solitary confinement altogether. This includes stricter regulations on who may be placed in isolation, mandatory periodic reviews of inmates' placement, and alternative disciplinary measures that do not involve prolonged deprivation of social contact. These initiatives represent a growing acknowledgement that the use of solitary as a default or punitive tool is neither ethically defensible nor effective in promoting rehabilitation or long-term safety. The documentary captures the tension inherent in these reform efforts. While some progress has been made, Supermax prisons like Red Onion remain highly controlled environments, and changes are often incremental and limited by institutional culture, budget constraints, and public perceptions of safety. Officers and administrators face the challenge of implementing reforms without compromising security, navigating the fine line between maintaining order and alleviating the human suffering caused by extreme isolation. Importantly, the reforms also bring attention to the broader implications for society. They encourage viewers to consider how the criminal justice system can evolve to better balance accountability, rehabilitation, and humane treatment. By exploring reform efforts, the documentary invites reflection on the possibility of change. That even within one of the harshest prison environments in America, steps can be taken to reduce suffering, restore dignity, and offer hope for inmates whose lives have been defined by silence and confinement. While Red Onion State Prison is defined by its extreme isolation, the documentary also reveals that the small, often overlooked routines and interactions in the daily lives of inmates play a critical role in maintaining their sanity and humanity. In a setting where 23 hours a day are spent in a confined, barren cell, these seemingly minor moments, receiving a meal tray, handling mail, brief eye contact with a guard, or even listening to the faint sound of a radio, can become essential lifelines. They provide structure, purpose, and a fleeting sense of connection in an otherwise oppressive environment. For many inmates, the day is punctuated by repetitive routines, which are not merely habitual, but vital coping mechanisms. They organize their schedules around meals, exercise, and small personal rituals such as cleaning their cells, arranging personal belongings, or engaging in mental exercises. Even repetitive counting, writing, or reading can offer a sense of order and control over a life that is otherwise externally controlled by strict prison regulations. These routines help mitigate the psychological effects of isolation, giving inmates small markers of time and a sense of continuity amid the monotony. The limited social interactions that do occur are similarly crucial. Guards, while primarily responsible for enforcing rules and maintaining security, represent one of the few points of human contact available. Even minimal engagement, a brief exchange of words, a nod, or the simple act of receiving a meal, can provide inmates with reassurance that they exist in a world beyond the cell. Mail from family or friends also serves as a vital link to life outside the prison, offering emotional support and a reminder that connection is still possible despite the surrounding confinement. Recreational periods, though brief, are another essential outlet. Time spent in small exercise yards or indoor activity spaces allows inmates a rare opportunity for physical movement and sensory stimulation, breaking the monotony of the cell. These moments, while short and highly controlled, can have significant psychological benefits, offering a temporary escape from the oppressive stillness of solitary confinement. Even something as simple as feeling fresh air, sunlight, or the movement of the body can counteract the cumulative effects of sensory deprivation. The documentary emphasizes that these small routines and interactions are not luxuries, but critical survival mechanisms. Inmates describe how meticulously adhering to schedules, developing personal rituals, and holding onto minor sources of connection can mean the difference between maintaining their mental stability and succumbing to despair. In this way, life inside Red Onion is not solely defined by the extreme conditions of isolation, but also by the human capacity to find resilience and meaning within those conditions, no matter how limited the opportunities may be. By highlighting the importance of these routines, the film underscores a paradox. Even in a system designed to remove human contact and autonomy, the tiniest interactions and personal habits become vital threads that allow inmates to retain a sense of identity, dignity, and hope. These small lifelines serve as a reminder that human beings inherently seek connection, structure, and meaning, and that even the harshest environments cannot fully extinguish these needs. While the walls of Red Onion State Prison physically confine its inmates, the documentary invites viewers to consider the broader societal implications of extreme incarceration practices. Red Onion is more than a facility for punishment. It serves as a lens through which we can examine questions about justice, ethics, and the role of incarceration in American society. By revealing the harsh realities of solitary confinement, the film encourages reflection on how society defines punishment, what it demands of those who administer justice, and what responsibilities it bears toward those it confines. The stark environment of Red Onion, where inmates spend nearly all of their time in isolation, offers a window into the limits of a purely punitive system. The documentary prompts viewers to ask whether the primary goal of incarceration should be retribution, deterrence, or rehabilitation, and whether a system that prioritizes control over human dignity is truly serving justice. The isolation and monotony experienced by inmates highlight a tension at the heart of American penal philosophy. A society that values liberty and human rights must grapple with the ethical consequences of practices that systematically deprive individuals of both. Furthermore, the film raises questions about societal complicity. While most of the public is physically removed from the Supermax environment, policies and funding decisions, as well as general tolerance of punitive extremes, make the system possible. By showing the psychological and emotional toll on inmates and staff alike, the documentary forces viewers to confront the idea that the costs of extreme incarceration ripple outward, affecting not just those confined but the broader moral fabric of society. Red Onion becomes a mirror in which viewers can examine collective attitudes toward punishment, empathy, and justice. The narratives of inmates and staff also encourage reflection on the human capacity for resilience and adaptation. In an environment designed to suppress individuality and social connection, people still find ways to preserve identity, maintain routines, and seek meaning. This resilience underscores both the fragility and the strength of the human spirit, suggesting that even within the most controlled and isolating systems, the innate needs for connection, dignity, and purpose cannot be fully erased. Society, then, is challenged to recognize these needs and consider how its policies align with or contradict them. Additionally, Red Onion's extreme conditions illuminate broader questions about criminal justice reform and the future of incarceration. The documentary highlights the tension between security, punishment, and rehabilitation, inviting viewers to think critically about alternatives to solitary confinement, the potential for restorative justice, and the ways in which prisons can evolve to balance safety with humane treatment. By bringing these issues to the forefront, the film fosters a national conversation about the ethical and practical limits of incarceration and the societal consequences of neglecting mental health, human rights, and rehabilitation within the system. Ultimately, Red Onion serves as more than a prison. It becomes a symbol for reflection on societal values. The conditions inside the Supermax compel viewers to ask difficult questions. How far should a society go to punish? At what cost does security come? And how does the treatment of the most isolated and vulnerable members of society reflect our collective morality? By engaging with these questions, the documentary challenges society not only to witness the reality of extreme incarceration, but to consider the changes necessary to align justice with compassion, dignity, and humanity. In conclusion, Inside Red Onion State Prison does more than document a facility. It forces us to confront the human cost of extreme isolation, the moral dilemmas of our justice system, and the responsibilities we bear as a society. Behind each locked cell door is a life shaped by history, circumstance, and resilience. A reminder that even in silence, human beings endure, adapt, and struggle to maintain their dignity. The stories of inmates and staff alike challenge us to reflect on the balance between security and humanity, between punishment and compassion. They ask us to consider not only the ethics of solitary confinement, but the kind of society we want to be, one that merely confines or one that seeks justice tempered with empathy and reform. Red Onion State Prison may be remote, hidden, and harsh, but the questions it raises echo far beyond its walls. It calls on all of us to look deeper, think critically, and act responsibly, ensuring that justice does not come at the expense of our shared humanity. Because ultimately, the measure of a society is not how it treats its strongest, but how it cares for those most vulnerable, even those locked away in the silence of Supermax.